morning. Mm. Here he comes. Here comes the baby. The big fat baby boy. The big fat baby boy. Okay, ow, 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 ow. Freaking elbowed me. It hurt. That did hurt me. Let me read, please. Thank you. Thank you, boo. Okay, scripting your game plan with healing mantras. Whether your intention is to heal or to plan the next step in a creative project, the working chart will give you information about what your next step will be. So you need to draw up a plan for action, like an architect's blueprints. The plan allows you to deal with problems or difficulties as they rise. To script a plan, begin at the first house of your chart and write down a word or a brief phrase that will help you put into practice the insight you have gathered from each house on the wheel. This word or phrase will become your mantra for action. For instance, if your actor archetype resides in your third house, self expression and siblings, and you are seeking guidance about how to release the weight of past professional failures, your mantra could be no repeat performances. Ideally, the mantra you choose should relate in some way to the significance of the house, the archetype that falls into it, or both. As an actor and the house of self expression both relate to the mantra drawn from the theater lingo. In one of the stories that follows, for example, Trevor had the hedonist in his eighth house, which rules other people's resources and legal matters. He was looking for guidance about starting an e-commerce business that would help people find good restaurants via the internet while traveling. And he felt that that combination reinforced his plans. And so he created pleasure and gain as his mantra for that house to remind himself that serving others' desires for pleasure could help him advance financially. Your mantras need not be clever wordplays, of course, although having a sense of humor helps. The important thing is to establish some organic connection between the mantra and the archetype house linkage. Once complete, this game plan can be used as a spiritual reminder of how to stay committed to the choices you've made. It will help bring back your spirit into the present time, and it will help you consciously manage the way you invest your personal power. I recommend that you write down these mantras on a small card and carry it with you at all times so that you can refer to it in the moments of trouble or indecision. The following stories are examples of how three people used working charts for guidance in their very different life concerns. Carl was seeking insights into his struggles with depression and drug addiction. Trevor was eager to break through his block with finances, and Faye was searching for guidance regarding a health problem. Carl's story. A relationship chart. I met Carl while I was sitting with friends around a hotel pool within sight of a lovely Caribbean beach. He and his buddy had just gotten off a boat and invited themselves to join us, and Carl immediately began acting the fool. Within 10 minutes of our meeting, for instance, he rolled up one of his sleeves and was showing me a tattoo of his daughter's name. That's the only true love of my life, he said. Clearly, Carl was in some pain, Still, only in his late 40s, his body had aged prematurely from an addiction to drugs and alcohol, which he also revealed to us. Carl's personality was fascinating of mixture of bravado, self-pity, and roguish charm. Beneath his clowning, tough guy demeanor, it wasn't hard to see a man at odds with himself and painfully in need of guidance. With very little prodding on my part, he agreed to let me help him cast a working chart seeking insight into his failed marriage and how he could be a better father. He had never found a way to get grounded in life. Although he seemed casual at first about his addiction to heroin, which had destroyed his marriage and come between him and his daughter, he was nonetheless less tormented by his inability to kick the habit. Carl was at a crossroads between wanting to heal himself and not being able to imagine that his life could be any different. When he spoke about his 12-year-old daughter, he would almost break down and would have to stare out at the ocean until he could gather his motions again. Carl desperately wanted to be a good father and wanted his daughter to respect him. Unfortunately, he went about trying to buy her respect by getting her anything she wanted, rather than working on the most difficult emotional issues between them. The working chart we cast refers only to guidance that Carl was seeking about his boredom, broken marriage, and his relationship with his daughter. He made a point of saying that in doing this exercise, he was making choices, not promises. He continually had to remind himself that he could not lie to his daughter and then run and hide the way he did with his wife. His intention was to build a healthy and loving relationship with his daughter, and this guided him in a drawing up a game plan. Figure 10 shows Carl's working chart. First house, ego and personality, hermit. Carl said that his wife, Karen, always saw him as a hermit, but in the beginning of their relationship, that didn't bother him. This pattern became a serious concern for her, however, as his addictions became the focus of his life. He and his addict archetype in his 8th house, and he withdrew from her more and more. I didn't want to see Karen, he said. She was always asking me if I was high, and I could never get away from lying to her. She could see it all over my face. All addicts lie. It goes with the habit. But you always think you can hide your addiction, that people can't see through you. She'd get a kick out of seeing the hermit in the house of my personality because she knew I was in hiding due to my drug habit. It was the shadow hermit that was ruling Carl's personality, withdrawing from society, not to gather his reserves of strength, but merely to avoid facing reality. Another interpretation of the hermit archetype in the first house was that his feelings of shame at having lost his self-respect were so intense that he could not face his wife. That's true, he said immediately. I don't want my daughter to see me either. I'm not proud of who I am today, believe me. Carl thought changing himself was nearly impossible, but he was willing to try anything. We asked what he could do that would help him become strong enough to face his daughter without feeling ashamed of himself. On reflection, he said, I would like to help my daughter realize that the hell drugs leads to. I would like to be able to tell her the truth about myself so that she will never be tempted to use drugs. I'd like her to learn from my mistakes. As part of the healing process, he decided to carry a small version of his mantras, his healing plan, in his wallet and refer to it like a map to guide his spirit, to remind himself of his commitment to recover his self-esteem. He used a phrase that his dad, whom he loved dearly, had used every morning when he would wake Carl up. "Look alive, Carl. It's a new day." So Carl chose that phrase. "Look alive," as his first house mantra because it reminded him of his father and awakened in him his desire to recover his self-esteem. That became the first step in Carl's game plan. Second house, life values. Wanderer. Carl said that he never could feel at home in one place. He longed to travel, but this became a problem as his marriage progressed. Karen and I met when we were in our 20s. We were young and crazy, and we didn't have a kid. We went everywhere together. Problem is, once our daughter Zoe was born, Karen gave up the wandering, but I didn't. Between my jug problem and never being home, her life was miserable. I tried to settle down, but I would go to the point where I thought I was going mad. I guess I valued being away from home more than I did being with her. The phrase he chose to help him heal this part of his life was, "Zoe love." This represented that, no matter where he was always sending his love to his daughter. Third house, self-expression and siblings. Fool, court jester. The fool in the archetype that carries wisdom in disguise into places that would otherwise disdain such knowledge. Carl paused when he heard that, and then he said that feeling like a fool was familiar to him in his communication with his wife. "You know, I always had to cope with depression one way or another, and I wanted to talk about it to Karen," he said, "but she disregarded it most of the time. She said I was always wrapped up in what bothered me and never had time to listen to her." Carl had a great deal of regret over the fact that he never acknowledged his pain because he never wanted to listen to his wife's pain or her criticism. I knew she was right, but I didn't want to hear it. Carl chose the mantra, "Listen," as the third house guide. Fourth house, home, saboteur. "I think I started sabotaging my marriage the day after we got married," Carl said. "It never occurred to me that anything in our lives would have to change, even if we had kids. Neither of us realized how important it would be for my wife to have a home." Carl described a number of incidents that took place either in the physical home or that related to the symbolic meaning of home as his wife saw it. He was apparently incapable of providing the kind of stable family life his wife wanted, much less living, in his words, as good neighbor Sam. From a positive point of view, Carl acknowledged that the saboteur on this house could have been my best white flag, and had I known about this stuff earlier, though I'm sure I wouldn't have listened anyway. Not a day went by when Carl didn't long to wake up in his old bed. "How true is it," he said, "that you don't know what you've got until it's gone." And so Carl chose the mantra, "Appreciate," for his fourth house guide. Fifth house, creativity, good fortune, storyteller. Carl gave out a yell when his storyteller arrived in his fifth house, saying, "I was kind of expecting that archetype to land in my marriage house, because I sure told my wife a lot of stories. But actually, I've told a lot of stories to a lot of ladies, so this archetype fits here maybe even more than my marriage house." I stepped out on my wife, and she knew it. I would get into an argument with Karen, and in my mind, that gave me permission to bed down with another woman. Believe it or not, I love my wife, and I would give anything for another shot at having a life with her. I know she wouldn't believe me if I told her I'd stay clean from drugs. What is that? Weird. More stories, huh? I'd have to have a lot of good luck behind me with that project, I can tell you that much. Carl insisted that he would also like to create an open and honest relationship with his daughter, although he admitted that this would take work because all of the lies she had seen him tell her mother. He chose his fifth house mantra, the single word, honesty. Sixth house, occupation and health, child. Carl always struggled with being an adult, as is clear from his difficulties in settling down and being a responsible husband and father. The only occupations he could handle were those from which he would come and go. A sailor and craftsman by trade, he was very good at woodwork, and he used this talent to keep up repairs on on the boats he was sailing. I am someone you hire for a day or two to fix this or that. This drove my wife nuts, and that bothered me because as much trouble as I had staying put, I always provided materially for my family. We had a nice home, even though I wasn't there a lot. She worked too, and that helped keep the place running. Carl was like a Peter Pan, never wanting to grow up. Yet he also had a pirate archetype and spent much time at sea. Carl's list of all that he had provided for his family, which to him proved that he had held up his end of the marriage partnership, referred only to material things. You should see my home, he said. I bought a great entertainment unit, a pool table that doubles as a ping pong table. I got my daughter a great computer so she could play all the computer games. Her friends were over all the time because there was so much stuff to do at our place. As kindly as I could, I pointed out to Carl that children need more than just toys and material gifts in order to grow and mature. In response, he said that his sixth house mantra would be emotional support, which represented his new commitment to give more of himself to his daughter. Seventh house, marriage and relationship, prostitute. The first thought that occurred to Carl when he saw the prostitute in his seventh house was that his wife was always thought of him as a street person selling everything he could get his hands on to make more drug deals. From his wife's point of view, Carl's true partners in life were his drug suppliers. When you're an addict, you don't care about anything other than getting your next fix, he said. So if your wife is in front of you and the guy who's got your next heroin shot is standing next to her, chances are you're going to pick your supplier first. So what does that say about who you are really married to? Carl said that creating a seventh house mantra was no barrier. Loyalty is the one word that says it all. No matter what, my loyalty to my daughter comes first. Eighth house, other people's resources, addict. Carl said that having an addict in his house of other people's resources was perfect. I mean, all an addict does is rely on other people's resources, drugs, money, anything that works. Carl admitted that he would rifle through his wife's purse for cash when he ran short. I would take her resources, if you want me to put it in this language. The behavior was just one more reason that his wife, after hanging in there with him for 21 years, demanded a divorce. She gave it her best shot. I realize that now. I'm not sure I could have stayed with her that long if she was the addict who always strayed from home. And then he paused. Yeah, I'd stay with her. Carl realized that he also drained his wife of all her inner resources during their marriage, and that he did not want to do the same to his daughter. That desire inspired him to say that he wanted to create with his daughter a material and emotional investment rather than a withdrawal. His eighth house mantra then, invest, not withdraw. Ninth house, spirituality, father. Carl's father archetype in his house of spirituality fit with his intention to discover how to be a better father to Zoe. He said, my screw-ups in my marriage and as a father are the reason I started to pray. Carl chose faith as his ninth house mantra. 10th house, highest potential. rescuer. Carl's father archetype in his house of spirituality fits with his intention to discover how to be a better father to Zoe. He said, "My screw-ups in my marriage and as a father are the reasons I started to pray." Oh, I said that one. 10th house, highest potential rescuer. Carl said that this was the most obvious match on the entire chart for him. Rescuing myself from my addictions and getting past the need to run away from my past is going to take everything I've got. I haven't been able to do that yet. If I thought I had a chance of getting back with my wife, I sure give it a try. But that ain't gonna happen. So what's my motivation? His response came directly from the child archetype in his house of health, exhibiting a kind of perennial mother-child bond. Carl refused to heal himself unless someone more responsible, like his ex-wife, could help him out. Yet he knew that he had to rescue himself, and the only phrase that represented the seriousness of this dilemma was sink or swim. 11th house, relationship to the world, pirate. Carl was a modern-day pirate. With his long hair, tattoos, and manner of dress, he reminded me of Errol Flynn as the pirate Captain Blood, and it turned out, of course, that he was a great admirer of Errol Flynn and his pirate escapades. Carl loved the pirate spirit and loved sailing the world. "I don't sail like a tourist," he said with pride. "I am a sailor. I've been in my share of barroom fights, and I've taken what's not mine when I've felt inspired to. But pirates don't make good husbands. When I told my wife that I can't change who I am, she decided there was no sense waiting around. I moved out of the house about a week after that conversation." How did the pirate affect his role as father? "Life is an adventure," he said, choosing those 4 words in his 11th house mantra. "I went about enjoying it too carelessly, but it's still an adventure, and I would like Zoe to believe that and experience that. I don't want her to be afraid of life because of the way I live." 12th house, the unconscious victim. At first, Carl thought this archetype referred to his being victimized, which it could, but that interpretation did not resonate with him as much as the realization that he had victimized his own wife constantly. For all Carl's obvious flaws, he wasn't afraid to shoulder the blame for them. Because of him, she had lived in constant fear. There were times on drugs where his behavior verged on psychotic. I would have hallucinations, 12th house madness, and I would threaten her. Eventually, she couldn't trust him at all because she knew that he was cheating on her, stealing, using drugs, and disappearing for weeks at a time. I drove her insane. I know it. She did feel like a victim of my disease, and I'm paying for it now. I'm alone. Carl struggled with depression now because he saw only an empty life ahead of him. "Getting my daughter back means the world to me. I only hope I can actually change enough to make that happen." For that reason, he chose transformation as his 12th house mantra. Although Carl's grief over his situation with his daughter and former wife was sincere, and even though he participated in this exercise with the belief that we can receive divine guidance, he unconsciously offered a negative interpretation of almost every archetypal pattern in his chart. As soon as any option or new thought would emerge, his immediate response was, that wouldn't work, or "I could just see my wife's face if I told her that I've had an archetypal transformation." At one point, his eyes filled with tears as he continued the exercise. Despite his pain, he deflected all options for change that I offered him. Carl's interaction with this tool is a classic example of a conflict in which the conscious mind reaches for guidance while the unconscious sabotages every effort to make changes. Carl's saboteur archetype in his fourth house is of particular significance because it revealed the area he most wanted to repair while underlining the danger of self-sabotage that he faced in that very realm. His working chart revealed the paradox that held his spirit in polarity, his desire to heal and his pirate's fear of never being allowed the freedom of the waters again. From a symbolic perspective, the third column, through this exercise in self-examination, Carl was able to step outside of his shadow and chart a new passage for his life. He was ready to reevaluate what mattered most to him and retrieve his spirit from the guilt and shame of disappointing people. If Carl could muster the fortitude to follow his new game plan, the chances were still good that he could salvage a decent relationship with his daughter. At the very least, this exercise allowed him to articulate his inner demons. Once these forces are brought out of the shadows and into the conscious mind, we have a chance to heal and resolve them. Let's read what archetype we left off at. Mystic. So next one is networker. Although networking seems like a modern skill tied to career advancement in the media age, it is actually quite ancient. Networkers expand their sphere of influence by forging alliances and making connections among vastly different groups of people, and can be traced back to the intrigues of the Middle Ages, Greece, Rome, and ancient China. Networking would also have an integral part of any military alliance, as well as all social and clan confederations in prehistory. In its positive aspect, this archetype helps us develop social flexibility and empathy that enables one to find commonality with others who might not at first seem to be potential friends, allies, or confederates. Like the, the related archetypes of messenger and communicator, the networker has the skills to bring information or power and inspiration to disparate groups of people. The shadow networker merely uses others for personal gain. Films: Peter Finch in Network, John Bowles in A Message to Garcia, Stuart Peterson in Pony Express Rider, Jeff Goldblum in Between the Lines. Religion and myth. Almost every culture on Earth has or has had a messenger of the gods who networks between the divine and human realms, including the angel Raphael in Judaism, angel Gabriel in Christianity, Jibriel in Islam, Matara Sivan in Vedic Indian, eagle and coyote, American Indian, Iris and Hermes, Greece, Mercury, Rome, Sraosa in Zoroastrianism, Nusku, Assyria, Nira, Sumeria, Srosh, Persia, Penal, Aztec, Savali, Samoa, Guomang, China, Narada, Java, Gna and Hermod, Norse. That is like a lot. So those are the and the messenger of the gods who networks between the divine and human realms. Very cool. All right, that's it. Ugh.